Lawmakers in Helena are considering two bills that aim to resolve a law enforcement dispute between the state, Lake County, and the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes. Montana Free Press reporters Caden Foreman-Webster and Nora Mabey are following these bills closely with their reporting, and they join me via Zoom today to explain the dispute and the proposed solutions on the table. Well, welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We will dive right into this. You have a new article out on this. And first, explain Public Law 280 at the center of this whole dispute.
So Public Law 280 is a federal law that transfers law enforcement jurisdiction over Indian reservations from the federal government to certain states. And this was enacted in 1953, and at that time, 6 states were mandated to adopt Public Law 280. Montana was not one of them. In Montana, you could opt in. So in the 1960s, Montana passed a law allowing individual counties to opt into Public Law 280 if the relevant tribes consented. And so the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes at the time did consent to adopting Public Law 280. They were upset with federal policing at the time and didn't have the resources at the tribal level. And at the time, Lake County welcomed the opportunity to police the tribes on the Flathead Reservation. They said that adopting Public Law 280 would help combat lawlessness in the community.
All right, and Caden, so what happened then?
So it did work out for a number of years after both parties consented back in the 60s. Eventually in the 90s, CSKT, or the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, wanted to start handling misdemeanors, and through legislative action, eventually they did begin to do that process. And from that point on, they both handled the jurisdiction, and eventually, after the sale of the Kerr Dam, Lake County insisted that this was kind of the breaking point, saying that they lost $2 million in property taxes at the time. And ever since then, it's been that ongoing issue of trying to get the ability to leave the PL 280 agreement.
Okay. So then that brings us to the funding issue with these two new bills in front of lawmakers in Helena are designed to address that, right?
Yes, so there's 2 bills right now that are proposing different solutions to this problem. There's House Bill 366, which is brought by Representative Tracy Sharp. He's a Republican from Polson. This would propose to reimburse Lake County $5 million over the course of 2 years for providing these law enforcement services on the Flathead Reservation. That bill has not made its way out of committee yet, but we're watching it. And then there's Senate Bill 393, which is brought by Senator Greg Hertz, and he's also a Republican from Polson. This bill also proposes to reimburse Lake County, but it's not specified yet how much that would be. And this bill has cleared the Senate, which is notable. It goes to the House next. And another notable piece of this bill is that it's garnered support from the lieutenant governor, which is a big deal given the past conflict with the governor's office on this issue. And then it also has support from tribal representatives and Lake County officials.
Okay, so walk me through both sides of these bills, what opponents and supporters are saying.
So for Sharp's particular bill, it was odd during his testimony because there was no proponents or opponents for it. Nobody showed up for it, which the committee did take notice of that. Multiple people voiced that they were pretty concerned with the fact that nobody came as a proponent, and stating that was going to really weigh in on their decision to vote on it and to not vote on it, which is currently the status of it. For Hertz's bill, Senator Hertz's bill, he had the lieutenant governor weighed in. He had a Confederated Salish and Kootenai councilman weigh in, and then also, I believe, multiple Lake County commissioners weighing in, all in support of the bill.
And
all right. Go ahead, Nora.
one opposition to Senator Hertz's bill, which has progressed farther than Sharp's so far, was Senator Jonathan Windyboy. He is a member of the American Indian Caucus, and his district encompasses 6 counties and 3 tribal communities. His main point of opposition was that he felt like this bill was unfair. He said, you know, what about the other 55 counties in Montana? And what about the other tribes that might want, you know, this type of law enforcement? And so nobody addressed his point directly, but, you know, the bill did clear the Senate. And so what will be really interesting is to see, you know, similar legislation in past years has been vetoed by the governor. And so it was notable that the lieutenant governor spoke in support of Hertz's, but it'll be interesting to see what happens with this. And even Senator Hertz, who brought this bill, said even with the support he's seen, he still thinks it's maybe a 50-50 chance of it actually becoming law.
Interesting.
Yes.
So this could have statewide impacts, right?
Potentially could have some statewide impacts if Lake County pulls out, because then the state is going to have to step into that jurisdictional role. And during his announcing his bill, Greg Hertz stated that it potentially, some estimates are saying it could cost the state $100 million or more just to take over this jurisdiction, to build the new facilities, to make sure there's proper policing and all of those different issues, which was, I think, one of his major selling points on it.
And through your reporting and research and going to the hearings, your sense of the outcome of this?
I think that one's going to be really tough to say, just because Hertz, his bill has, obviously, it has the most support. And even he said that it's a 50-50, that it's going to be able to make it through. So I think that's pretty telling.
Yeah, I would echo what Caden said. I think it's pretty hard to predict what will happen because this feud has been going on for years. You know, bills have made it far, like I said, and then they would get vetoed, or, you know, one time a bill passed to reimburse Lake County, but the legislature only appropriated $1. And so this conflict has been really interesting to follow. The county has even taken the state to court over this, but ultimately judges sided with the state, and they ruled that it is up to the legislature to reimburse Lake County for this if they so choose. So that's kind of why we're seeing this all happen. And then kind of nodding to what Caden said about the implications, this definitely has consequences for residents of Lake County, whether they're native or non-native, because regardless of what happens, it could either keep, you know, everything the same, how it's been working, or it could change hands when it comes to jurisdiction. So it could change what it looks like for people, whether it's state, tribal, or federal law enforcement entities that are investigating and handling certain crimes. And then sort of on the statewide implication, like what Caden mentioned, if neither of these bills pass, the county has threatened to withdraw from the agreement altogether. And that's what would kick jurisdiction to the state. And like Caden said, that's why Senator Hertz said it could cost the state, he said, $100 million to sort of invest in police forces and facilities and things to fill that gap.
Oh, it'll be very interesting to continue to follow this and see what happens here. Anything else that you would like to share in regards to the bills or the dispute?
I would note that the lieutenant governor did point out that they're open to a one-time only deal on this issue, which is pretty positive for the bill from what the proponents are looking at. And then also Representative Shelley Fyatt pointed out something interesting, that as a previous council member herself for the Confederated Salish Kootenai tribes, she said that this is the most well together she's seen the Lake County and the tribe working on this particular issue.
Yeah, and one last thing I would note is just the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes have hesitated for years to kind of weigh in publicly about this conflict. For a while, it was the county and the state going back and forth, but the tribes didn't want to weigh in because they, you know, maybe didn't know what was going to happen. And this year, it is really notable, like what Caden said, that Representative Shelley Fyatt who's a citizen of the tribes, she has said she would carry Senator Hertz's bill on the floor. So that's a really big step in this conflict.
Absolutely. Well, when will we see your next report come out?
I think we're looking at once it starts to make some actual headway, and because right now it's it's stuck in the House, and it's during this process that they're going to have to amend it and figure out the exact funds that will be going with this bill, and from there, if it can pass the House, it's going to have to go back to the Senate because it's been amended, and then eventually, if it makes it to the governor's office, if it gets signed into law, and then I think we'll address like the implications of the jurisdictional changes that are going to come to the Flathead Reservation.
Nora, did you want to add to that?
I was just going to also shout out that Caden is working on a big in-depth piece on Public Law 280, the history, the timeline. It's really interesting. This is kind of a wonky issue, but when you get into the history and the stories behind it and what it means for people on the ground, it's really fascinating. And so he'll have a story on that maybe in the coming weeks or so.
All right.
Yeah.
I look forward to that, Caden.
Yeah, I'm looking to try and explain the history of tribal jurisdictions. I'm looking to get help from an Indian law professional on it just because of how complex and it's been changing over the last like 200 years. So it's a lot.
Yes, it is very fascinating. Well, we'll watch for your reports from both of you, and thank you so much for joining me.
Great, thanks for having us.
All
Thank
right.
you.